as your seat and turn to your neighbor and say, I'm digging it. I'm digging it. Today we're talking about pits. And it's not your neighbor's pits next to you. We're talking about digging some holes, y'all. Does anybody here enjoy digging holes? You know, I was in middle school. Yeah, one person. Thank you. Is that Bill? I love you, Bill. Thank you. Thank you. I was in middle school, and there was a popular book out. And I'll never forget, we were living in Florida, and my parents decided it was date night, right? And so there was a guy who was living with us. His name was Travis Grote, and he was a single guy. For those of you who know Tim Grote, it's actually his brother. He lived with us while we were in Florida for a few months. Tim comes here. He was in first service, and he thought this was a very funny story. We called Travis Grote Nanny Grote. And he was just a single guy, and we had a big old conversion van, plush blue leather. Come on, y'all. A little shag carpet in there. Even had a VCR, right? I mean, come on. It was luxury at its finest. The back seat would fold down into a queen bed. I mean, you guys know. I actually drove that for the first year of high school when I drove. I'd parked that big old conversion. Is all I had. That's humbling. And he decided, hey, your parents are going on a date night. We're going to go to the movie. So he piled all 5 kids in the car. My sister Chelsea was just a little baby at the time. We took her too. And we went and saw a popular movie called Holes. Does anybody know this movie, Holes? And we went and saw that movie. And the title kind of gives the point away. I mean, it's about digging holes. And there was a lady, and she had apparently buried a treasure in this dried up lake. And she had passed on, and there was a guy named Stanley Yelnats, which it's Stanley Yelnats because Yelnats is Stanley spelled backwards. And him and Zero, if you go to the next picture, they go on a journey because they got put in, prison, well, I guess a prison for young men, and they had to go out and dig holes. And so everybody's looking for this treasure. And it goes on and on. It's a really good movie. The Fonz is in it, which my mom loves the Fonz, for anybody who's a fan of Fonzie, Arthur Fonzarelli. But it was a great movie, and it's all about digging holes. And they had this song called Digging Up Bone Digging. And as I was reading this story this week, they were looking for treasure in the pit. And I think many times people look at pits in life, how you get there, it doesn't matter. We look at them with a negative mindset, but I want to tell you that there's great treasure in the pit. You can learn a lot when you're in a pit. You can learn a lot about God, about what God says about you. You can learn a lot about what you actually believe when you're in a pit. Because many times when we're in a pit, all we see are the walls around us, and if we choose to see the walls around us, then guess what? We're going to start doubting that God is working beyond the walls. Everybody turn to your neighbor and say, I'm digging it. Brandon, you want to hold this? I don't know what you're going to do with it, but I don't want to carry it around anymore. Thanks, buddy. Here's what I want to tell you about a pit. There is great value in the pit. God uses pits to do things in our life that we're going to see in the story of Joseph today. Many of you have walked with Jesus for a while. You come out of a pit, and you can actually say, where would I actually be without the pit? Where would I be? The person I am now, the character that I have now, the ability to believe God beyond the walls of the pit, were all developed in the pit. Where would I be without the pit? So turn to Genesis chapter 37. Say, I'm digging it. We're digging it today. Now, last week we learned about Joseph. His father gave him a coat of many colors, very different than the Donny Osmond coat he wore in Joseph in the Technicolor Dreamcoat. His brothers got jealous of his father's love for him, and they have become so jealous that they are filled with hate. And we're going to see that today. Let's pick it up, chapter 37, verse 12. Can you do that with me, Joseph? Now his brothers went to pasture their father's flock near Shechem. Everybody say Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, Are not your brothers pasturing the flock at Shechem? Come, I will send you to them. And he said to them, Here I am. So he said to them, Go now, see if it is well with your brothers and with the flock, and bring me word. And he sent him from the valley of Hebron, and he came to Shechem, and a man found him wandering in the fields, and the man asked him, What are you seeking? And Joseph said, I am seeking my brothers. Tell me, please, where they are pasturing the flock. And the man said, They have gone away, for I have heard them say, Let us go to Dothan. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them in Dothan. I want to talk about this section real quick, just to give you some context. I want to talk about Joseph's journey. If you have your outline, this is going to be the first section. You need to understand that Jewish people were semi-nomadic. They were semi-nomadic. What would that mean? That would have meant that they lived in tents. They would have moved around based on where they needed nutrition to feed the flock. It would have been common for these nomads to have children to watch over the flock. They would have been brought into the family business, and they would have been keepers of the flock, and many times they would have followed the flock into distant areas away from where the family would be stationed. So even though Jacob is stationed here, his sons are taking the flock wherever they need to go to find nutrition. They would move based on seasons, the rainy season, right? Hopefully not hurricane season like in Florida right now. But they would move based on seasons and where vegetation would be, while the family stayed rooted in one area with the small children and things like that. I want to show you this map. If you can put that up there, Noah. Thank you, buddy. If you see this red line right here in the back, this is Joseph's journey. Joseph's dad said, Joseph, go check on the brothers. They have taken them up to Shechem. So Joseph walks 40 miles. Okay, so this is an example of many times they would take the flock away from the family to find vegetation. He's wandering around the fields. Then we see that Joseph meets a guy, and he's like, listen, have you seen my brothers? The guy's like, yeah, I've seen them, but they went 10 miles more north to Dothan. So Joseph ended up walking 50 miles in all. That's a lot of walking. Like, he definitely got his 10,000 steps in. And so Joseph is just going field to field to field, seeing if his brothers are there. Like, he doesn't have Find My iPhone, right? He doesn't have GPS. Could you imagine being Joseph just going field to field trying to find the flock? And so that's what's going on. Joseph's supposed to bring a report back to his dad, but let's pick it up in verse 18 and let's see what happens. They saw him from afar, and before he came near to them, they conspired against him to kill him. That's talking about Joseph's brothers. They said to one another, here comes the dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Then we will say to that, a fierce animal has devoured him, and we will see what will become of his dreams. But when Reuben heard it, Reuben is the oldest brother. He rescued him out of their hands, saying, let us not take his life. And Reuben said, shed no blood. Let's just throw him in this pit here in the wilderness, but do not lay a hand on him. And he might rescue him out of their hands and restore him to his father. So when Joseph came to his brother, they stripped him of his robe, the robe of many colors that he wore, and they took it from him and threw him in the pit. The pit was empty. There was no water in it. That's important. 25. Then they sat down to eat. What a time to have a meal. And looking up, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. One of the things we talked about last week was generational sin. When you hear the word Ishmaelites, you go back to, I guess it'd be Abraham, one of Joseph's great-great-grandfathers. And he actually had an affair on his wife with a servant girl and had a son named Ishmael. So we're seeing some Ishmaelites from the descendants of Ishmael coming around here. This is just more generational sin. Not saying that those people are bad people, but we're seeing the consequences of generational sin come back. And let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother, our own flesh. And his brothers listened to him. Then Midianite traders passed by, and they drew Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit. And they sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. They took Joseph to Egypt. Last week we talked about how a lot of people like to have parallels between Joseph's story and Jesus' story. This is one of those things that they kind of always bring up, where Joseph was sold, Jesus was sold by Judas. Verse 29. When Reuben returned to the pit and saw that his brother Joseph was not in the pit, he tore his clothes, and he returned to his brother and said, the boy is gone, and where shall I go? Then they took Joseph's robe and slaughtered a goat and dipped the robe in blood, and they sent the robe of many colors and brought it to their father and said, this we have found. Please identify whether it's your son's robe or not. And he identified it and said, it's my son's robe. A fierce animal has devoured him. Joseph is without doubt torn to pieces. Then Jacob tore his garments and put sackcloth on his loins and mourned for his son many days. All his sons, all his daughters rose up to comfort him, but they refused to be comforted. No, I shall go down to Sheol, to my son mourning. Thus his father wept for him. Meanwhile, the Midianites had sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard. I want to break this story down. Let's look at the guilty party who had a hand in this crime. The first one is the brothers. They see Joseph coming from afar. He had to walk 50 miles. And can you imagine seeing your brother and be so filled with hate that your first step is to conspire to kill? I want to tell you something about hatred. Hatred hardens your heart. Hatred hardens your heart. And here's what I want to tell you about hatred. Many times people who are filled with hurt will allow hurt to develop into hatred. They become obsessed with the hatred they have. They become angry. They become bitter. You see it in their mannerisms, in their life. You see it in their attitude. Because they're so upset about what has happened in their life that they've allowed it to develop into this bitterness and this rage. But here's the thing about people who are filled with hatred. Many times they obsess about revenge so much, but they don't realize that revenge is not theirs to have. It is very clear in Scripture that it is God who will have revenge on your behalf. See, and what they do is they try to control it because they want the satisfaction of getting the revenge. And then once they have the revenge, they realize that it wasn't everything that it was lived up to be. It actually just makes it worse. And instead of obsessing about revenge, what if we work towards forgiveness? You with me today, church? What if we start taking steps towards forgiveness to begin releasing that hardened heart? We see throughout Scripture that there are times in the Bible where God hardened Pharaoh's heart. His heart became hard to the things of God. And when you're filled with hatred and bitterness to the point where you see your brother coming and you conspire to kill them, listen, you have lost all grasp of reality. Because the thing is you're not a reasonable person at this point. You are so consumed with your revenge that it doesn't matter about the people around you. It doesn't matter what's going on. Your kids become something in the background for you. Your marriage becomes something in the background. You have been so hurt that you got to take it out on somebody else, and everybody else is paying the price, even though you feel like you're the one who's been hurt. Listen, I want to encourage you today. Man, if your heart is hardened, take steps to forgive and check the hardened heart today. Don't let it go any farther. Revenge is not yours to have. The thing about his brothers, too, they throw him into a pit. This would have been a desert terrain. No water. You guys remember that in the story? So here's Joseph just in this pit, getting hit, sun's blazing. I mean, I don't think he had 30 SPF. You know what I mean? I don't think he's putting on, Beachbody coconut oil. You know what I mean? That ain't a fun tan to have. There ain't no water. This is a death sentence for Joseph to put him in the pit. And what do his brothers do? I was reading a commentary this week, and this guy was saying, so the brothers throw him in the pit, they conspire to kill him, and they sit down and have a meal. And he was talking about how most of the time when we do something wrong, our stomach turns upside down. Right? We're filled with shame. We're filled with regret. We're like, man, we should not have done that. Or we just feel sick because of the consequences of our actions. There was no sickness. In fact, they were hungry. This shows you the degree of how their hearts were hardened towards Joseph, filled with so much hate. Let's look at his brother Reuben. Reuben tried to satisfy his brother's revenge and kind of walk the fence. But listen, let me tell you something. If you're dealing with people who are filled with hate, there's no walking both sides of the fence. It's all or nothing for them. They're people who are not in a position to compromise because they're not reasonable. And Reuben says, well, why don't we just throw him in this pit over here? What a nice thing to do. And then, you know what? I'm gonna go away, but then when the brothers are kind of done and they've had their revenge, I'm gonna sneak back and save my brother. Now, this is an interesting thing because Reuben would have been the oldest of the 12 brothers. The blessing and the birthright should have gone to Reuben, but it's going to Joseph. And here Reuben is stepping forward saying, have mercy on Joseph. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. We don't know Reuben's intentions. Was his intentions to be like, hey, I'm going to save Joseph and bring him back to my father? Hey, Dad, guess what? I saved your son. Let me rat out my other brothers to see if I move up in the ranks. We really don't know. So we've just got to take him for his actions, which show that even though he had a hand in it, he tried to walk the fence. The third person who is a part of this crime is Judah. This is another one of the brothers, and he speaks up. He obviously doesn't know about Reuben's plan to come back and save his brother Joseph. And he sees these Ishmaelites, and he says, hey, listen, man, instead of just killing Joseph and shedding blood, leaving him in this pit, why don't we just sell him? Why don't we make some money? And so Judah sells his brother Joseph, and here's the thing I want to tell you. Joseph is going to live a life of righteousness, but you know God doesn't choose Joseph to bring the line of Christ into the world. You know he chooses Judah, the one who's about to sell his brother into slavery. Think about this for a second. The complexity of this story. And here's what I want to tell you something. Even though you've done terrible things in your life, God still chooses to do good through you. Because if you want to hear more about Judah, man, just go to the next chapter. He does some terrible things to this girl named Tamar. But yet God chose Judah to bring the line of Christ into the world so that we may be saved, not Joseph. Isn't that fascinating? Man, we can't understand God's plan. Can we all just agree on that? We look at this story and we would be like, God, why didn't you choose Joseph? He was the obvious choice. But God knows. And in Isaiah it says, God, your thoughts are greater than mine. There are just some things we're not going to understand until we all get to eternity together. So Judah sells his brother. Then we see the Midianite traders. These were the Ishmaelites who were going to Egypt to sell spices. They're going to sell myrrh, and it was a very lucrative business down in Egypt, which was the superpower of the day. And here's the thing we need to know about these Midianite traders. They had a hand in this too. They are actually a result of sin that's been passed down because Abraham had an affair on his wife and produced this line. Now, here's what I want to tell you. One of the things that's overlooked in this story is the fact of slavery. And as Christians, we value life. We value life. We reject slavery altogether. Doesn't matter if it's sex slavery. It doesn't matter if it's children mining for cobalt. Listen, we value God's highest creation. And I believe, and this church believes, that slavery diminishes it. We are not called to rule over somebody else. God is called to rule over all of us. And every person is unique and beautiful in the sight of God. And so we reject slavery as a church and as believers altogether. And so these Midianites were taking part in the profiting off of God's highest creation, and it is a sin. It's a sin. Amen, church? So let's look at the innocent party. Jacob. One of the things that's interesting about Jacob is kind of the guy who brought all of this on, this hatred. And he's having a little bit what goes around comes around moment. Jacob deceived his father to get the birthright from his brother. And guess what his sons are about to do to him? They're about to deceive Jacob and convince him that Joseph, the son that he loves the most, is dead. Isn't it amazing generational sin? Listen, I want to tell you something. For those of you, maybe you've identified some patterns in your family of sin that just keeps repeating. Sexual sin is one that is just extremely prevalent. Pornography, having sex outside of marriage, being promiscuous, right? Another one is being a pessimistic person. We pass that from generation to generation, and being a complainer instead of a complimenter, right? And so these are things that we pass down from generation to generation that shape the next generation's faith, that shape the way they're able to believe in God. And listen, Jacob deceived his father, and now Jacob is being deceived by his sons. And here's what I want to tell you. God has given you the authority through the power of Jesus Christ to actually break those generational sin patterns. Listen, what if I told you that through the power of Jesus, you could identify what those patterns were and say, I'm going to choose to put my stake in the ground and say no more, so my children and my children's children don't have to keep repeating the same thing that keep our family in bondage. God has given you that power through the name of Jesus. Don't allow generational sin to keep snowballing and you pass it on to the next generation. Listen, I want to tell you one of the greatest sacrifices you could make, one of the greatest ways that you could set up the generation after you is to say, I'm going to carry the ball 10 yards down the field so they don't have to go through what I went through. Many of you parents, the way that you're parenting right now is you're saying, listen, my parents did the best that they could. I love my parents. I respect them. But I'm going to add and get better on what they did. So that way my children maybe don't have to go through this. My children don't have to experience this. My grandchildren don't have to experience this. Maybe for some of you, you've begun saving. You're trying to get debt-free because you want to build generational wealth in your life so your children don't have to go through what you went through. Listen, here's what I'm trying to tell you. God has given you the power, the responsibility, and the authority to pass on something better to the next generation. And what we see here is people who continually do the same things over and over and over again. And it brings destruction into their family. Jacob, after he hears his son is dead, he puts on sackcloth and ashes. He says, I will go down to Sheol, which means hell. And he said, I'm never going to stop grieving because my Joseph is dead. There's no hope for the future. And I want to talk to you a little bit about sackcloth and ashes. There's great symbolism of these two things in the Bible. Sackcloth was a sign to show mourning and repentance. You can also see this happening in Esther chapter 4. And what they would do is many times put on goat hair or something like a burlap sack, and it would be very coarse, it would be very uncomfortable, because it was an outward sign that they are in mourning and submission to God. They would then put ashes all over their body, and what they would do is it was a reminder to them that they were birthed from dust of the ground, just like God birthed us from the dust of the ground, and we will return to the dust of the ground, and that God is so much greater than we are. It was also a sign of absolute grief. So Jacob says, I'm going to put on sackcloth and ashes because I am in extreme mourning for my son. We see Joseph, who's a part of the innocent party. Poor Joseph. Can we just agree with that at this point? I think Joseph's come to the realization that he's actually not in control of what's going on at all. He's just chilling down in this pit. We really don't have a sense of what he's thinking or what he's doing, but we can see what he does after the pit. And that can tell us a lot about what he was doing in the pit. Listen, for some of you, you need to understand that. Many times what you do in the pit sets the tone for what you're going to do after the pit. Joseph, what does he do? He gets sold into slavery. He ends up at this guy named Potiphar's house. And he literally personifies the verse, whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord and not for man. And all of a sudden, he keeps getting promotion, and he ends up running his whole household. So here's what we can say. We can say that Joseph, after the pit, decided to be a man of righteousness. He did not allow where he was to dictate whether he was going to make a good decision or a bad decision for God. Where he was, he did not allow that to dictate what he thought of God, what he thought of God's plan. He continued to move forward. And Joseph came out of the pit saying what many of you have gone through the pit and able to say after is that the pit did not destroy me. It didn't destroy my view of God. It didn't destroy my view of God's bride, the church. How many people have gone through the pit and all of a sudden they think less of God's church, which is the bride of Christ? How many people think less of their families? And it didn't destroy them. We know 1 Peter 5:6, one of our memory verses for this series is, humble yourself, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, and at the proper time he will exalt you. Listen, many times God will take us through a pit to humble us, so when he exalts us, we stay humble. So here's what I want to ask you today. Do you have a plan for the pit? What if right now we decided that pits are going to come? We know between every mountaintop is a valley. What if we pre-decided in our heart and mind what we're going to believe, what we're going to allow our minds to think about, what we're going to allow our attitude to be in our heart, what words we're going to allow ourselves to say? Let's pre-decide this right now. Because it's not an if, it's a when the pit's going to come. And what if we put boundaries in our life so we could have the outcome that Joseph has and come out of the pit saying, I am a righteous man, choosing to live a righteous life before my righteous God? I want to talk to you about biblical definitions of a pit. If you have your notes, you can pick up there with us. There's two biblical definitions. The first one is a physical pit. This is literally the dig it up bone digging, right? This is Stanley Yelnats. Literally, Joseph was thrown into a pit that would have been used to dig for water. It would have been used to trap animals in. So there's a literal pit, but then there's also, all through the Psalms and the Proverbs, there's a figurative pit. And this figurative pit represents the grave or death. And there's three ways that we see in Psalms and Proverbs that we end up in this figurative pit. The first one is this: something is moving against me to bring me harm. We see in Psalm 35, he says, for without cause they hid their net from me. Without cause this person or thing moving against my life, they dug a pit for my life. Something is moving against me that wants to bring me harm. It could be something outside of your control. It could be our enemy, the devil, who roams around like a roaring lion, and the enemies of darkness setting a trap for us. The second way that we can end up in a figurative pit, the grave or death, where our soul is longing for life. There's no water, right? You guys know what I'm talking about. Where you're in this pit and you're dying in this pit, is God has led me to the pit. God has led me to the pit. If you look at Psalm 88, 1-7, it says, O Lord, God of my salvation, I cry out day and night before you. Let my prayer come before you. Incline your ear to my cry. For my soul is full of troubles, and my life draws near to Sheol. There's that word again, hell. I am counted among those who go down to the pit. I am a man who has no strength. Like one set loose among the dead, like the slain that lie in the grave, like those whom you remember no more, for they are cut off from your hand. You have put me in the depths of the pit. He's talking about a place where there's no life. There's no spiritual vibrancy. And God, you have put me in the depths of the pit. Your wrath lies heavy upon me, and you overwhelm me with your waves. So the first way, something moving against me. The second way, God will put you in the pit. And then the third one, you guys may laugh at this one, I have put myself in the pit. How many times do we dig a pit and we fall in? We set a trap for ourselves. It says this in Proverbs 26, 24-30. Whoever hates disguises himself with lips and harbors deceit in his heart. And when he speaks graciously, believe him not. For there are 7 abominations in his heart. He's saying, listen, if somebody's filled with hatred, don't believe a word they say, because they're going to look great on the outside, but on the inside, it's not so great. They're filled with hate. He said, though his hatred will be covered with deception, even though we're not going to be able to tell it from the outside, his wickedness will be exposed in the assembly. Whoever digs a pit will fall into it, and a stone will come back on him who starts rolling it. A lying tongue hates its victims, and a flattering mouth works ruin. Listen, for some of us, man, we just need to start reading Proverbs. Don't you guys love Proverbs? I mean, it's just so cut and dry, isn't it? Hey, listen, you hang around with a fool, you're going to be a fool. And that's just how it is, right? I mean, the bottom line is, if you start hanging out with fools, you're going to be acting like a fool. It's just that cut and dry. Listen, if you dig a pit for yourself because of the hatred in your heart, because you've allowed things to come in and poison your life because of the pit that you're in, you're digging a pit for yourself and you're putting yourself in the pit. He talks about pushing a rock up a hill and then the rock just rolling back on us. How many times do we do this to ourselves? So this figurative pit, there's 3 ways we can end up in it. Something or someone is moving against me. God has led me to the pit. Or number 3, I have put myself in the pit. Here's what I want to tell you about pits. For those of us who have been believers for walking with God for a while, man, if you're new to church, you're new to Jesus, listen, I want to tell you that there's a testimony in this room that many people who have come through the pits now say, where would I be without the pit? You want to know why? This is why. This is what pits do. Pits make you believe more than what you can see. Listen, Joseph is in this pit. All he can see are the walls around him. If you allow those walls to close in on your heart, you're going to allow that pit to penetrate your heart. You're going to become poisonous. You're going to become toxic. You're going to begin focusing on the things that you can control, and really you can't control any of them. Instead, what if you believe that God is with you and beyond you? What if you believe that God is with you in the walls of the pit and he's beyond the walls of the pit, bringing about the plan that he has for you? So number one, the pit makes us believe more than we can see. Number two, the pit shows us how much we actually believe in God. Isn't that so true? Church, can anybody testify today that it's really easy to say things, but then when you got to live it, you find out what you're actually made of? The pit shows us how much do we actually trust God. So then the question becomes, as we make a plan for the pit, what should we do in the pit? What should we do in the pit? I want to give you two things. The first thing is this: fill your life with faith increasers. Things that increase your faith. Listen, here's the thing. While you're in the pit, you don't need anybody diminishing your trust in God. When you're in the pit, you don't need anybody to lead you to disbelief. You need people who will lead you to believe even more. And here's why this is so important. Seriously, let's think about this. People who are in the pit can harden their heart very easily. And the things and the life-changing truth of the good news of Jesus Christ can be one of the things that we harden our hearts to. How many people have gone into a pit in their spiritual life, and all of a sudden, John 3:16, it just doesn't carry the punch it once kept in my heart? The words haven't changed. The message hasn't changed. The power of Jesus hasn't changed. You know what changed? Our heart. Because we allowed the pit to penetrate our heart. We allowed it to poison us to the things that are good. And you know what we do? We end up diminishing the work of Jesus in our life, diminishing the work of Jesus in others' lives. Have you ever met somebody who's filled with faith and you think to yourself, man, sometimes those people, they can be a little bit annoying sometimes. God is in this. God is working. This is a great example of some first steps that are a red flag for you. If you're saying, oh man, I've heard that verse time and time again, I'm doing this again, you need to check your heart. The message of Jesus hasn't changed. So what's changed for you? Could it be that you are in a place spiritually of death and grave? Could it be that you've allowed influences into your life that have caused you to be a nitpicker and a negative Nancy? Hello, that's God right there. He's calling us. Somebody pick up. And here's the thing. You can choose to embrace that. You can choose to embrace that. But you are going to struggle to believe in the goodness of God as you continue down that road. You know what you're going to do? You're going to take on a life of being a judgmental person, and you're going to look at everybody else and point to their faults when you're the one sitting in the pit and everybody around you knows it, but you don't have enough self-awareness to see it yourself. Here's the thing about the pit. Here's the thing about the pit. It will diminish the truths that have changed our life. It'll make them tradition. It'll just make them another thing to do. Man, maybe we should read John 3:16 every week. What do you guys think? Because I think the thing is it's kind of become like a cultural phenomenon, right? Where people hold up the sign, and it's easy to be like, oh, John 3:16 again, the pastor's going to that verse again. But listen, the message hasn't changed. The words haven't changed. So what's changed in your life? Let me ask you, do you have a plan for the pit to not allow the pit to penetrate your heart, but to allow prayer to protect your heart? Fill your life with faith increasers. The more you allow yourself to see the walls around you, the more negative you'll be, and the smaller your belief will become. So what should we do in the pit? Fill your life with faith increasers. The second thing, reject that which leads you to disbelief. Reject it wholeheartedly. When you were in the pit, this is a critical time. And I want to tell you something, new believers. If you take a step forward, you come to know Jesus, you get baptized, just be ready for a pit. Be ready for a valley. Every time you hit a high, you're going to hit a low. And here's what you need to do. Protect your heart. Be proactive, not reactive. And reject that which leads you to disbelief. The best way to do that, proclaim the promises of God in his scripture. Speak scripture over your life. The second way, pray without ceasing, without stopping. It is an ongoing conversation with God. God, I'm mad today. God, that verse, I'm so sick of hearing that. God, if I hear it again, and then all of a sudden, God has a way of turning the tables on us, doesn't he? You start talking to God and the thing you're upset about, you start blessing him for it within 5 minutes. Isn't that so funny how God does that to us? He kind of puts us in our place, doesn't he? He reminds us he's God, we're not. We're his servants, he's the king. And at the same time, we have no reason to complain because look at all these blessings he's brought into our life. But when you allow the pit to penetrate your life, you become filled with hate. You can't see those things. All you see are the walls around you. It's very easy to sit and sulk and have a pity party. And many times people filled with hate, what are they going to do? They're going to try to find 2 or 3 people and get them to get in this pit with me, and we're all just going to sit here and become bitter. Isn't that so true? Listen, protect your heart. Have a plan for the pit. Reject that which leads you to disbelief. And here's what I want to tell you, church. I know that pits can be painful. I understand that. But here's what we're going to see in the story, and this is what I'm going to end with today. God uses pits to position you. He uses them to position you where he wants you to be. And I'm going to give you evidence of this in the story. If it wasn't for the pit, Joseph never would have gone to Egypt. He never would have been sold into slavery. He would have never gone to Potiphar's house, learned how to manage a household. He never would have been accused of something he never did, which Pastor Ed's going to talk about this next week. He never would have gone to prison. He never would have learned the managerial skills at Potiphar's house. He never would have been able to practice interpreting dreams again. Never would have interpreted the dream of the cupbearer who then goes to Pharaoh. Pharaoh has a dream, doesn't know what to do with it. The cupbearer says, listen, I know a guy who can interpret dreams. And then all of a sudden, he takes the managerial experience he gets at Potiphar's house. He takes the practice that he's been giving him to interpret dreams. And it all culminates in the moment he approaches Pharaoh, interprets the dream, tells him there's a famine coming, and I know how to save it because I did it at Potiphar's house. I can manage this. Think about how significant this is. If it wasn't for the pit, none of this would have happened. See, God uses the pit to position you. That's why many of us who have walked with Jesus for a while, where would we be? Where would we be without the pit? Praise God for the pit. Because I wouldn't be standing here where I am right now. You wouldn't be sitting where you are right now if it wasn't for the pit. Some of you look at your marriages and you say, thank God for the pit, because it forced us to change. We could no longer sit in our disbelief, in our negativity. We could no longer ignore the things that were going on and just act like they're not happening. We actually had to come together, talk about it, and we learned that we actually loved each other. Praise God for the pit. God uses the pit to position Joseph. Not just Joseph. Joseph wasn't just in that pit for himself. He was actually in the pit for his brothers as well. He was in the pit for the nation of Egypt. They would have starved to death. He was in the pit for his family. They would have starved to death. He was in the pit for the Lion of Judah, which Jesus was birthed through, for your salvation. Think about the magnitude of this. They would have died of hunger. Praise God for the pit. I know the pit is painful. But if it wasn't for the pit, Joseph's brothers wouldn't have faked his death. They wouldn't see their father mourn for years. And then when they show up to Egypt asking for food and they have no clue it's Joseph, and Joseph pulls a trick on them and says, I'm going to put your younger brother Benjamin in prison. What do they say? No. Please don't do this. We have already lost a brother and we cannot stand to see our father mourn any longer. God didn't just position Joseph in a place. He changed the brothers' hearts. They had to watch their father mourn. And then when Joseph said they're going to take Benjamin, what did they say? No. Which means their hearts were softened. And when the next time they met Joseph, their hearts were ready to repent and to have restoration. Where would we be without the pit? Turn to your neighbor, say, I'm digging it. Let me ask you, do you have a plan for the pit? Do you have a plan for the pit? Have you decided, this is my attitude, this is my belief, these are the words, this is the character. Even though I'm in the pit, I'm going to choose righteousness just like Joseph, and wherever I am, I'm going to work at it with all my heart as working for the Lord and not for man. Do you have a plan for the pit that involves people who increase your faith, things that increase your faith, not shows, not people in your life, not messages of people who cause you to nitpick things, but people who cause you to have big belief in God? Do you have a line in your mind that says, I will not cross this line of disbelief with God? God, these thoughts are coming into my mind, but I refuse to allow myself to think these thoughts and believe these thoughts. I am planting my flag right here. I will not go any further. Do you have a plan for the pit? I want to tell you why. There's two ways that you're going to deal with the pit. The first one is you can allow the pit to overtake you. You'll become bitter, you'll become angry because you're not in control. We have some control freaks in the house today, right? I mean, right? People who love control. Listen, maybe through the pit, God is teaching you that you're not in control. Like, hey, listen up, like I love you, but like you ain't the king. He is. And God is teaching you to let control go, surrender it to God, and trust him with him. But if you don't, you're going to become bitter, you're going to become angry, you're going to be filled with disbelief, and the things that once brought life into your life, the good news of Jesus Christ, will be yet another checklist and yet another verse that annoys you. This is very true, isn't it? It's very true. You can take steps to get there. Or will you believe beyond the walls of your pit and believe that God is with you and moving all around you to position you to fulfill the plan he has for you? There's two ways that you can respond. Here's what I want you to know. This is my bottom line. There is great purpose in the pit. There is great purpose in the pit. There is a reason that you're in the pit. You know, we sang that song today, God is not against me. I think for some of us in this room, we're in a pit, and we keep sitting in the pit, and we think that God is just up in heaven enjoying our sorrow, enjoying our sulking. Listen, God doesn't delight in your pain. I just want to let you know that right now. And maybe God is just waiting for you to look up. Listen, I don't know where you're at in your life, but it's really easy for us as people to become negative and keep ourselves in the pit. Maybe we didn't bring ourselves to the pit. Maybe God brought it. Maybe something moved against us. But it's really easy for us to just sulk and keep ourselves there when God is wanting something greater for our life. So church, will you join me today? Listen, will you join me and believe that there's great purpose in the pit? Say, I'm digging it. Would you stand with me? We're going to sing one last song. I'm going to ask everybody to close your eyes. This is a time of response, so I'm going to ask nobody to move around. Church, I want to talk to you about something. It is very, very important that we understand and have a plan for the pit so we can see the goodness of God in whatever season and land we're in. I am here to tell you today that God is not against you. That in fact, he has great plans for you. He has a great purpose for you. He has a plan that only you can fulfill. And the moment you stop believing that is the moment you put yourself into the pit. God will bring the pit into your life to position you to fulfill the great plan he has for you. So listen, will you believe that there's great purpose in the pit? Will you choose to believe that and reject anything that causes you to diminish that belief? As we sing this last song, some of you, man, you just need to raise a shout of praise. Because I'll tell you, the number one thing that will get you out of the pit sometimes is just singing a song of joy to the Lord. Paul and Silas did it in prison. They had a pretty good result. So let me tell you something. The pit has great purpose. Will you believe that? God, we thank you for this time. Lord, we thank you for this message. God, we choose to believe great things, no matter where we're at, what season we're in, whether we're in the pit or out of the pit. God, we believe that you're working a plan, you're bringing about a purpose that's greater than we could ever imagine in our life. God, we speak that promise into our heart, and God, we sing this song with great faith. We reject anything in our life that causes us to diminish that you have great plans and a great purpose for us. In Jesus' name we pray, everybody said, amen. Let's sing this song, church, as we continue to worship.